The quiet of a crisp January morning in Wichita, Kansas in 1971 was about to be shattered, and the city would never again feel quite so innocent. It was the 15th, a Friday. Joseph Otero, a 38-year-old former Air Force sergeant, was at home at 803 North Edgemore Street with his wife Julie and their two youngest children, 11-year-old Joseph Jr. and 9-year-old Josephine. Their two teenage children were at school. The family, originally from Puerto Rico, was planning to move to Florida soon, dreaming of a new start. They had no way of knowing that a predator had already been watching their house, studying their routines. A predator who would later say he chose them almost at random, simply because Joseph Otero had once been in the Air Force, and he, the hunter, felt a deep, simmering resentment against the military. The man, Dennis Rader, was 25 years old. To his neighbors in the unassuming suburb of Park City, he was an unremarkable family man, a former Boy Scout, a former airman himself. He worked installing burglar alarms for ADT security services, but inside he was a cauldron of violent fantasies, a collector of sadistic pornography and bondage imagery, a man who had been tying up and torturing small animals since he was a child, honing a craving for absolute control over living things. He called this hidden self the Phantom, and the Phantom was hungry. Sometime that morning, he cut the phone line to the Otero house. He pulled a stocking cap over his head, slipped inside, and moved with a chilling, methodical calm. He confronted Joseph and Julie in their bedroom. He had a gun, but he also carried a length of cord, his signature tool. He told them he was a fugitive, that he needed their car and some food. He was lying. He was there for the experience, for the thrill of the bindings, for the ultimate power of holding life and death in his hands. He bound Joseph and Julie's hands and feet. He put a bag over Joseph's head. Then he led Julie into the living room and did the same to her. He later claimed he hadn't intended to kill them that day, that Joseph Otero had made a move, forcing his hand. It was another lie, a self-justification. He strangled Joseph first. Then he went to Julie. He put a plastic bag over her head and tightened a cord around her neck, watching the life leave her eyes. But his work wasn't done. The fantasy required more. He went into 11-year-old Joey's room. The boy was sick, home from school. Rader bound him, put him in a closet, and strangled him. Then he turned his attention to Josephine, his namesake. 9 years old, he took her to the basement. He bound her in a way that was more elaborate, more intimate. He fashioned a noose and hung her from a pipe, but he ensured her toes could still touch the floor, prolonging the agony. He placed a pillow beneath her feet. Then he did the unthinkable. He masturbated, achieving a climax at the peak of her suffering. This was the core of his desire, sexual sadism, the fusion of ultimate control with sexual release. He left her hanging there, a small broken doll. Before he left, he took his time. He ate some cereal from the kitchen. He rummaged through their belongings. He took a few small souvenirs. Then he walked out, blending back into the mundane world, leaving a scene of such profound horror that it would haunt the Wichita police force for decades. The city was terrified. The police had no leads, no suspects, no motive. The killer was a ghost. For 3 years, there was silence. Then, in the spring of 1974, the ghost began to speak. On March 17th, he mailed a letter to the Wichita Eagle. It was a multi-page, single-space typed document. Inside, he gave himself a name, a brand, the BTK. It stood for Bind, Torture, Kill. He described the Otero murders in chilling, proud detail. He included a photocopy of the drawing of the noose he had used on Josephine, a drawing he had made from a library book on knots. He promised more killings. "How many do I have to kill," he wrote, "before I get my name in the paper or some national attention?" The letter was a bombshell. The police had been dealing with a brutal but perhaps disorganized killer. Now they were facing a narcissistic, communicative psychopath who craved the spotlight. The media, as he desired, splashed the name BTK across their front pages. The legend was born, and the fear became a permanent part of the city's atmosphere. Just a month later, on April 4th, 1974, he struck again. Catherine Bright, 21, was at her home with her 19-year-old brother. Kevin Rader entered, armed with a .22 caliber pistol and his kit of cords. He bound them both. He stabbed Catherine multiple times and shot Kevin in the head. Miraculously, Kevin survived, playing dead until Rader left. He would provide a description, but it was generic. A white male, medium build, wearing a mask. The phantom remained elusive. The pressure on the police was immense, but BTK went quiet. For 4 years, the city held its breath, wondering if he was dead, in prison, or simply waiting. He was waiting. The fantasies were still there, simmering. On March 17th, 1977, the anniversary of his first letter, he struck a third time. He had been stalking a woman named Shirley Vian, but her husband was often home. On this day, he saw the husband leave. He entered the house where Shirley was with her 3 young children. He herded them all into a bedroom. He told the children, aged 5 to 9, that he was going to tie up their mother and that they were to be quiet. He bound Shirley to the bedposts and placed a plastic bag over her head, strangling her as her children watched in terror. He then left, telling the children not to untie their mother or she would be in trouble. He later expressed disappointment that he hadn't been able to kill the children too, but the presence of 3 of them was too much of a hassle. His fourth and final known attack came on December 8th, 1977. He had been watching the home of 25-year-old Nancy Fox, a quiet, pretty woman who lived alone. He cut her phone line, entered her apartment, and confronted her. He bound her hands and feet. He put a stocking mask over her head. Then he strangled her with a belt or a cord. He took his time afterward, arranging her body in a sexually suggestive pose. He stole her driver's license as a trophy. Then he did something that would become a hallmark of his communication style. He went to a payphone a few blocks away and called the police. In a calm, monotone voice, he said, "You will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing. A female, bound and strangled. It's BTK." He hung up before the dispatcher could respond. The city was in a state of siege. The police had hundreds of suspects, thousands of tips, but no solid evidence. They didn't know it then, but the man they were hunting was, by all outward appearances, the most ordinary of men. In 1978, Dennis Rader married Paula Dietz. He became a father. He got a job as a compliance officer for the Park City government, a dog catcher and code enforcer. He was a leader in his church, the Christ Lutheran Church, where he was elected president of the Congregation Council. He was a Cub Scout den leader. He was a man who enforced the rules by day, and by night he fantasized about the murders he had committed and the ones he still wanted to commit. And then, as abruptly as he had begun, he stopped. The communications ceased. The killings ended. For 25 years, there was silence. The BTK case grew cold, becoming a legendary unsolved bogeyman story, a dark chapter in Wichita's history. Detectives retired, files were archived, the world moved on, and Dennis Rader moved with it. He raised his family, he mowed his lawn, He attended church picnics. He became a grandfather. The phantom seemed to have vanished, perhaps satisfied, perhaps dead. But the phantom was not dead. He was dormant, and the narcissistic need for attention, the craving to be recognized for his work, never left him. It festered inside the aging, balding, bespectacled man. In 2004, the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders, something in him snapped. He saw media retrospectives. He felt his legend was fading. He decided it was time to re-emerge. On March 19, 2004, a package arrived at the Wichita Eagle. Inside was a purple, floppy disk. There was also a letter signed BTK and a photocopy of the driver's license of Nancy Fox, the trophy he had taken 27 years earlier. The city and the police were stunned. The ghost was back. But this time, the world was different. This time, the police were ready with a new weapon, digital forensics. They knew the floppy disk was the key. They created a sterile computer environment to analyze it. They found a document on it, a letter from BTK. But they also found something he never intended to give them: metadata. The computer file had a last saved by property. It pointed to a user named Dennis. More importantly, they found that the file had been worked on at Christ Lutheran Church, and the disk itself had been used by the church's president. The noose, after 3 decades, was finally tightening. The police launched an intense but incredibly discreet surveillance operation. They obtained a pap smear from Paula Rader, taken during a medical procedure under the pretext of a national security investigation. They compared the DNA from that sample to the DNA recovered from under the fingernails of one of BTK's victims. It was a familial match. Dennis Rader was their man. On February 25, 2005, a Friday, detectives watched as Rader left his office in Park City. They followed his black Jeep Cherokee. They pulled him over in a quiet, pre-planned traffic stop. It was swift and clinical. There was no struggle. He was asked to step out of the car, and he was placed in handcuffs. The phantom, the monster who had held a city in terror for a generation, was captured without a fight. The man who had bound so many was now himself bound. The interrogation that followed was a surreal spectacle. Rader, ever the bureaucrat, was calm, cooperative, and almost proud. He spoke about his crimes with the detached, analytical tone of a man discussing a hobby. He drew diagrams. He corrected the detectives on details. He referred to his victims as projects. He described his hit kit and his Factor X, the moment when his dark alter ego took over. He confessed to the 10 murders in chilling, methodical detail, reliving them without a trace of remorse. He even suggested that if he hadn't been caught, he was planning another project, a woman he had been stalking named PJ, and that it would have been a big one. In court, during his sentencing, the families of his victims finally had their chance to confront him. They spoke of their decades of pain, their stolen lives. Rader sat impassive, taking notes as if he were at a business meeting. When it was his turn to speak, he offered a rambling, bizarre statement. He apologized, but it was a hollow, legalistic apology. He said, "I know the victims' families will never be able to forgive me. I hope eventually they will be able to accept it." He then had the audacity to ask the judge if he could make a presentation, a sort of BTK 101, for the benefit of the law enforcement officials in the room. The judge denied the request. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, a total of 175 years, without the possibility of parole. He is incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. In prison, he has reportedly created a BTK museum in his cell, with clippings and drawings. He corresponds with pen pals and journalists, still seeking the attention he always craved. He is an old man now, but the phantom is still there, trapped in a cage of his own making, a permanent testament to the fact that the most terrifying monsters are not the ones who hide in the shadows, but the ones who hide in plain sight, the ones who look just like us. The story of BTK is not just a story of murder, it is a story of the chilling, mundane face of evil and the relentless pursuit that, 30 years later, finally gave a haunted city its answers and a measure of peace.